is pure forced brutality and bullying of ordinary citizens who were obeying and answering them. Wasn't the young girl enough? But now they brutally picked up their dog, and the way the officer is taking it away is very inhumane. Why are these police officers behaving so strangely and handling these good citizens as they are habitual criminals? Another cop once again comes charging at the minor girl lying on the ground. The girl seems to be already under the force of the knee of the officer lying on the stairs. She seems to be sobbing, and her face looks like she is hurt. But still, the other officer comes and starts using excessive force on her. This is not good. She seems like hurting. The daughter is begging and pleading with the cops to let her go. She is hurting.
Stop.
No, this is my daughter.
Put that down.
This is my daughter. She's 14. You can't arrest a 14-year-old. No, you cannot.
Seeing her minor little girl getting arrested, this father gets up and leaves, repairing the daughter's bicycle. He starts confronting the police officers. You cannot arrest a 14-year-old girl. You cannot. Police officers do not seem to understand the law and start using excessive force on him. The father is in anguish. He cannot see his little girl get arrested. They are not criminals. He is just another citizen who was cooperating to the fullest with these cops. But the cops had other ideas.
No, you can't! Bullshit! Let me get my dog!
You are not gonna
Let me get my f***ing dog!
You are not going to walk over.
He's gonna start fighting everybody! Let me get my...
Father asks them to let him get his dog, who may bite anyone, to protect his daughter. But the cops are out of their mind. They cannot seem to understand what is going on. This is where things get out of the hands of police officers.
Everybody! Let me get my dog! Let me get on the ground! Fucking dog!
Get on the ground.
I'm not a risky shit! I'm not...
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Stay down, don't move! You stay down, don't move! If you get up, you are going to get tased again. Do you understand me? You stay down.
Getting my dog!
Roll over onto your stomach.
I was getting my
Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Do not move.
I won't, sir. I won't move. Can you put my dog away, please?
We will take care of your dog. Put your...
Please, I don't want you guys to shoot him or anything.
We're not going to shoot your dog.
God
Knock it
damn
off.
it! You guys, I didn't do shit. I was trying to get my dog so he wouldn't attack
I've got the male in
you.
custody. We're still working on the
Oh my God!
We'll take additional units.
Father keeps asking, please do not hurt my dog. Do not shoot my dog. He knows what the officers are capable of, as he knows the history of cops. They start shooting the moment a citizen resists illegal arrest. His family could be destroyed, his daughter could be killed, and his dog could be shot dead. He loves his family, this is for sure.
Stop!
Choke my dog!
I'm not choking!
Yes,
I'm a canine officer, dude!
God damn it! I had no fucking whippets!
You are under arrest.
For what?
Obstructing and resisting
I
arrest.
obstruct nothing! I was trying to help you!
Stop.
Jesus fucking Christ!
Stop.
Get your
Roll
captain!
on your side. Look at yourself,
I was trying to get my dog. You threw me on the ground because I didn't want you guys to hurt my dog or hurt me or hurt my daughter.
Okay.
I'm not an asshole. Look at my record.
Stop.
Thank you. And you don't have to step on me like that.
I'm not stepping on you.
You just stepped on my skin.
Father keeps asking them to not hurt his family and dog. He wants them to check his record. He is not a criminal, his daughter is not a criminal, and they seem like a real noble family. Police is taking his daughter. They have arrested a minor girl forcefully and exceeded their powers. The father lying on the ground looks at his daughter being taken away.
Just treated me?
Spread your feet. I haven't searched it.
I have nothing. My God. Joke. I would like to speak to your chief,
You can
please.
speak to them all. You're not going to speak to the
Please.
chief.
I would like to speak
Chief
to your
doesn't
chief,
care what
please.
you have to say.
I did absolutely nothing to you guys. I didn't even threaten you.
Okay, well, you're going to go to jail. You're going to jail.
Father asks them to call their chief, but the officer says you are going to jail. For what? For taking care of her little girl? The police seem to have exceeded all limits here. They have used excess force on this father and daughter.
But yeah, he's correct.
I am.
And I'm sorry. I was trying to stop my dog from going nuts like that, and I didn't want him to bite anybody.
What is your name?
My name's John Wayne.
John.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So I'm not going to ask you any questions, but I want to tell you my perspective. And I know you don't remember it, but we all have body-worn cameras.
You started yelling at the officer, telling that he can't
arrest my daughter. I
because he's
remember that.
14, and then you started going towards that officer.
No, I was going towards my dog. I promise you.
But here's
I
John,
promise
John,
you. I would never go after you
John,
guys.
listen.
Okay, you guys serve and protect. Listen to me, please.
Can you let me speak, and then I'll give you an opportunity?
Father keeps apologizing to the officers even after what they did to him and his daughter. He asks for their forgiveness for his dog biting an officer. He states that he wanted to get to his dog so that it would not bite any officer. But the officer still won't listen to him and asks him to shut up.
And you said no.
I'm going after my dog.
I understand that, but
And
you're
I
yelling
apologize.
at us. So that's what happened here. And if I tell you to get on the ground and you
I did.
refuse, no, you didn't. I tased you and you fell to
You
the
did.
ground.
You're right. You're right.
So I told you
You're
like 3 times to get on
You're
the
right.
ground.
You're
You
right.
gotta comply, man.
I wasn't threatening you guys, though. I was looking out for the safety of you guys and my dog.
Look,
I swear to God.
I'm a dog
see
guy.
that, though,
I'll
sir.
take care of your dog.
I didn't see that,
Okay.
sir. I apologize, okay?
Regardless if you saw it or not.
This guy is a gentleman. He wanted to protect his daughter. His dog also cared for the officers. He did not want them to get hurt by the dog. He keeps explaining to them, but the officers keep refusing his perspective.
I didn't obstruct nothing, dude! Oh my God! Can I get my Cubs hat, please?
They have arrested the daughter. Now they are to take the father to the stations and let the dog be locked inside their house. But they do not know what is to follow here. The gentleman's father would not stop here. He sues the police for doing this police brutality to his daughter and forcefully arresting them.
One of the other big stories we're following tonight, a Loveland family's filed a lawsuit against the city's police department over an incident that happened during the arrest of a 14-year-old and her father.
I was outside working on my daughter's bike, and I seen 4 police officers show up
to call her out to talk.
It just got really escalated really quick, and next thing you know, they're wrestling with her, and I couldn't do anything. I was helpless watching my daughter.
He recalls what happened. They took his 14-year-old daughter by force. Everything happened in an instant. He calls the incident horrifying and terrifying. And how could it not be when someone's minor girl gets arrested by use of such force?
I was mad. I was scared. I've never been in a situation quite like that before.
They know they're being recorded, and they don't change their behavior.
What if it's your child and you're the parent?
The Bodycam footage begins with a routine call that should never have resulted in arrests, injuries, or a federal lawsuit. What unfolds is not merely a case of officers making split-second decisions under pressure, but a methodical demonstration of how institutional power, unchecked discretion, and procedural indifference can transform a minor civil dispute into a violent confrontation that destroys trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. The initial radio transmission establishes the foundation of what should have been a straightforward investigation. Officers respond to a report involving a verbal argument and an alleged slap between 2 young people at a Safeway location. The suspect is described as being in custody at the scene. Already, the language used begins to shape the officer's approach. The term "suspect in custody" frames the situation with a presumption of guilt and an expectation of arrest, rather than an investigation that might reveal context, nuance, or the need for de-escalation. What the radio transmission does not convey, and what becomes critical as events unfold, is that the alleged victim is an 18-year-old adult male, and the alleged perpetrator is a 14-year-old minor female. This age differential is not merely a detail. It represents a fundamental imbalance in both legal culpability and the appropriate enforcement response. Yet the officers arrive at the residence with a posture that suggests they are dealing with a straightforward adult assault case, complete with multiple units and an apparent expectation of taking someone into custody. The father is outside his home, engaged in the most mundane of parental tasks, repairing his daughter's bicycle. This detail matters because it establishes both his physical location and his mental state. He is not barricaded inside, refusing to cooperate. He is not hostile or defensive. He is simply unaware that his cooperation with law enforcement is about to result in trauma for his family and criminal charges for himself. When officers arrive and request to speak with his daughter, he complies immediately. There is no hesitation, no resistance, no attempt to shield her from questioning. He calls her outside, and she emerges from the home without incident. This is the moment where the trajectory of the encounter is still salvageable. The officers have a cooperative family, a minor who is willing to speak with them, and no active threat or exigent circumstances that would justify immediate enforcement action. What happens instead is a masterclass in how officers can create the very resistance they claim justifies their use of force. The daughter sits down with officers and begins to answer their questions. Her account is not evasive. She does not refuse to speak. She explains that she and her boyfriend had broken up after she discovered he had been cheating on her for 7 months. She went to retrieve her personal belongings, a unicorn, a lanyard, an elephant, a bike lock key, and a bungee cord. The items themselves are telling. These are not valuable possessions. They are sentimental objects, the kind of things young people exchange during relationships. Her motivation is not criminal. It is emotional and entirely understandable for someone her age processing the end of a relationship marked by betrayal. She continues explaining that the boyfriend promised to pay for the bungee cord and told her to extract the money in a crude manner. She describes returning home afterward. Throughout this account, she is nervous but communicative. The body language captured on camera shows a young person trying to navigate an intimidating situation with multiple armed officers standing over her. She does not know her legal rights. She does not know that she is not required to answer their questions without a parent or attorney present. She is doing what most people her age would do when confronted by police, trying to be cooperative in the hope that compliance will make the situation resolve quickly. But the officers are not interested in resolution. One officer steps away and mutes his body camera. This is a critical moment that often passes without adequate scrutiny. Body cameras exist to create accountability and provide an objective record of police interactions. When an officer deliberately mutes that recording during an active investigation, it raises immediate questions about what is being discussed and why it needs to occur off the record. The muting is brief, but it coincides with a visible shift in the officer's demeanor and approach. When the audio resumes, the decision has already been made. The officer who is questioning the girl moves toward her with clear intent. There is no warning given to her or her father. There is no explanation of what is about to happen or why. The officer simply begins to physically restrain her, and her immediate reaction is confusion and fear. She does not understand why she is being grabbed. She has not been told she is under arrest. She has not been informed of the charges. She has simply transitioned from answering questions to being physically controlled. This is where the legal framework surrounding arrests of minors becomes critically important. In most jurisdictions, the arrest of a juvenile requires a higher level of scrutiny and procedural care than the arrest of an adult. Officers are expected to consider alternatives to physical custody, particularly for minor offenses. They are supposed to notify parents or guardians and allow them to be present during questioning. They are required to have clear, probable cause, not merely reasonable suspicion, before taking a minor into custody. None of these safeguards appear to be in place here. The girl begins to cry. Her voice breaks as she tries to pull away, not in an aggressive attempt to flee, but in the instinctive reaction of a frightened child who does not understand why she is being hurt. 2 officers converge on her, and the force escalates rapidly. She is not given time to process what is happening. She is not given an opportunity to comply with commands that have not yet been issued. She is simply overpowered. The Bodycam footage captures the physical reality of this moment with uncomfortable clarity. The girl is smaller than the officers. She is not armed. She is not presenting any physical threat. Yet the officers handle her with a level of force that would be questionable even in the arrest of a physically resistive adult. She is pushed, pulled, and ultimately forced to the ground. Her cries are audible and distressing. This is not the sound of someone resisting lawful arrest. This is the sound of someone in pain and fear. The father, who has been standing nearby watching this unfold, reaches his breaking point. His daughter is on the ground. Officers are restraining her with their body weight. She is crying and calling out. And he does what almost any parent would do in that moment. He intervenes. His voice rises as he tells the officers to stop, that this is his daughter, that she is only 14 years old, and that they cannot arrest her. His words are not threats. They are pleas grounded in a fundamental belief that there must be some mistake, some misunderstanding that can be corrected if he just makes the officers aware of the facts. But the officers do not see a concerned father. They see interference. And in that reframing, the father transforms from a cooperating citizen into another subject requiring control. One of the officers redirects attention toward him, and the situation spirals beyond any reasonable boundaries of proportionate response. The father's concern for his daughter is now being treated as obstruction. His presence in his own yard, watching officers hurt his child, is being criminalized. He asks to retrieve his dog, which has begun to react to the chaos and raised voices. This is not an unreasonable request. It is an attempt to prevent further escalation and ensure that the animal does not bite anyone in the confusion. But the officers refuse. They tell him he cannot move. They tell him to get on the ground. And when he does not immediately comply, because he is still processing what is happening, still trying to understand how a simple conversation has turned into this, they deploy a taser. The sound of the taser is distinct and unmistakable. The father's body seizes as the electrical current courses through him. He falls to the ground, his voice now a mixture of pain and disbelief. He is not a criminal. He has no history of violence. He called his daughter outside to speak with police, and now he is lying on his own property, incapacitated by a weapon designed for situations involving active threats to officer safety. The officers swarm over him, forcing his hands behind his back and placing him in handcuffs. He is still trying to explain, still trying to make them understand that he was only concerned about his dog, that he was not threatening them, that he has done nothing wrong. But his words fall on indifferent ears. The officers are no longer listening. They are processing arrests. The human beings in front of them have been reduced to subjects requiring custody and transport. Throughout this sequence, the Bodycam footage reveals a disturbing pattern. At no point do the officers attempt de-escalation. At no point do they explain their legal authority or the specific charges justifying these arrests. At no point do they acknowledge the distress they are causing or consider whether their actions are proportionate to the alleged offense. They operate with a kind of mechanical certainty, as if the decision to arrest was made before they even arrived, and everything that followed was simply the inevitable execution of that predetermined outcome. The father lies on the ground, his face pressed against the concrete, and asks the officers to check his record. He knows he has no criminal history. He knows there is nothing in his background that would justify this treatment. He is trying to invoke his identity as a law-abiding citizen, believing that this information will somehow shift the officer's perception and lead them to reconsider. But identity does not matter in this moment. Compliance does not matter. The machinery of arrest has been set in motion, and it will not stop until it has completed its function. As the father is held on the ground, he watches his daughter being led away in handcuffs. She is still crying. Her face is flushed and swollen. She looks back toward him, and in that glance is a profound betrayal of trust. She had been taught, as most children are, that police officers are there to help, that cooperation leads to safety, that doing the right thing will protect you. In this moment, all of those lessons are revealed as lies. She has learned instead that authority is arbitrary, that compliance offers no protection, and that the people entrusted with power will use it without mercy or restraint. The father remains on the ground, handcuffed and surrounded by officers who have just used a taser on him in his own yard. His daughter has been taken away, still crying, still confused about why answering questions honestly has resulted in her arrest. The scene has all the visual markers of a major criminal apprehension. Multiple officers, weapons deployed, 2 people in custody, a dog barking frantically inside the house. But strip away the theatrics of enforcement, and what remains is a profound absence of legal justification for everything that has occurred. The conversation that follows between the father and one of the officers reveals the chasm between how police perceive their actions and how those actions appear under even minimal legal scrutiny. The officer approaches and begins to explain what he claims happened, framing it as a matter of perspective that the father simply does not remember correctly. This rhetorical strategy is common in post-arrest interactions. By suggesting that the citizen's recollection is faulty, the officer attempts to establish his own narrative as the authoritative version of events, supported by the supposed objectivity of body camera footage. But the body camera footage does not support the officer's account. It reveals something far more troubling, a series of decisions made without legal foundation, escalated without necessity, and justified only in retrospect through the language of officer safety and resistance. The officer tells the father that he started yelling at officers and telling them they could not arrest his daughter. This is presented as if it were a criminal act in itself, as if a father verbally objecting to the arrest of his minor child constitutes obstruction of justice. The law does not support this interpretation. Verbal objection, even heated verbal objection, does not meet the threshold for obstruction unless it physically prevents officers from performing their duties. Standing in one's own yard and saying, "You cannot arrest my daughter," is protected speech, not criminal conduct. The officer then claims that the father began moving toward another officer, framing this movement as inherently threatening. The father immediately corrects him, stating that he was moving toward his dog, not toward any officer. This distinction is critical. Moving toward a pet to prevent it from biting someone is a reasonable action taken in the interest of everyone's safety, including the officers. It is not an aggressive move. It is not an attempt to interfere with the arrest. It is a father trying to control a chaotic situation that the officers themselves created through their decision to forcefully arrest his daughter without warning or explanation. The officer's response is telling. He acknowledges that the father said he was going after his dog, but then adds that regardless of the father's stated intent, the officer perceived the movement as threatening, and therefore the use of the taser was justified. This is the core of qualified immunity logic in action. The officer's subjective perception of threat becomes the only relevant factor, regardless of objective circumstances or the citizen's actual intent. If an officer feels threatened, then any level of force becomes defensible, and the burden shifts entirely onto the citizen to prove that the officer's fear was unreasonable. But fear cannot be manufactured through escalation and then used to justify the consequences of that escalation. The officers created the circumstances that led to the father's distress. They chose to arrest his daughter without warning. They chose to use physical force on a minor who was not resisting. They chose to ignore his requests to secure his dog. And when he reacted as any reasonable parent would, with alarm and an attempt to prevent further harm, they reframed his protective instincts as criminal behavior requiring violent suppression. The father continues to apologize, a response that reveals how deeply conditioned citizens are to defer to police authority, even when that authority is being exercised unlawfully. He says he is sorry, that he was trying to protect the officers from his dog, that he would never go after them because they serve and protect. This language is heartbreaking in its sincerity. Even after being tased, even after watching his daughter brutalized, even while lying handcuffed on the ground, he still believes in the mythology of law enforcement as a protective force. He still thinks that if he can just explain himself clearly enough, The officers will understand and recognize their mistake, but the officer cuts him off repeatedly, telling him to stop talking, telling him he will have his turn to speak, asserting control over even the rhythm and flow of the conversation. This is another subtle exercise of power. The officer decides when the father may speak, what he may say, and how long he may say it. The father has no agency in this interaction. He is allowed to respond only when given permission, and his responses are immediately dismissed or reinterpreted to fit the narrative the officers are constructing. The officer tells the father that he gave him 3 commands to get on the ground, and that the father refused. The father disputes this, saying he did not hear those commands. The Bodycam footage would either support or refute this claim, but the officer does not offer to review it with the father. Instead, he simply insists that the commands were given and that the father's failure to comply justified the use of the taser. This raises a critical question about the reliability of verbal commands in chaotic situations. If a father is focused on his daughter being hurt and on preventing his dog from attacking someone, is it reasonable to expect him to hear and immediately comply with commands shouted in the midst of that chaos? And if he does not hear them, does that non-compliance constitute willful resistance? The law recognizes that resistance must be knowing and intentional to justify force. A person cannot resist an arrest they do not know is occurring. They cannot obstruct an officer if they are unaware that their actions are being interpreted as obstruction. The father's attention was on his daughter and his dog, not on the officer's commands. He was not defying authority. He was processing a traumatic situation in real time. But the officers treated his confusion and distress as defiance, and they responded with violence. As the conversation continues, the father asks if he can retrieve his Seahawks hat. This small request is almost absurd in its mundanity, yet it reveals something profound about how people cope with trauma. In the midst of being arrested, tased, and separated from his daughter, the father is trying to hold on to some element of normalcy, some small personal item that represents his identity beyond this moment. The officers ignore the request. The hat does not matter. His comfort does not matter. His humanity, in this moment, does not matter. The daughter has been placed in a patrol vehicle and will be transported to juvenile detention. The father will be taken to the county jail. The dog remains in the house barking frantically. The officers have achieved their objective. 2 people are in custody. The scene is secured, and the arrests will be documented in reports that frame the officers' actions as necessary and appropriate responses to resistance. But none of this addresses the fundamental question that should have been asked before any of this began. What crime was committed that justified these arrests? The alleged offense is a domestic violence incident involving a slap. The complainant is an 18-year-old adult male. The accused is a 14-year-old minor female. Even accepting the boyfriend's account as entirely truthful, the appropriate response would have been to document the incident, possibly issue a citation, and refer the matter to juvenile authorities for further investigation. Domestic violence laws exist to protect victims from ongoing harm and to hold perpetrators accountable within a framework that considers the severity of the offense and the likelihood of future danger. But the officers made no effort to assess whether this situation met those criteria. They did not ask whether the boyfriend was afraid of the girl. They did not inquire about the history of their relationship or whether there was a pattern of violence. They did not consider the context of a breakup involving infidelity and the retrieval of personal property. They simply heard the word slap and decided that an arrest was warranted, without regard for the age of the accused, the circumstances of the incident, or the availability of less intrusive alternatives. This reveals a deeper problem in how law enforcement approaches domestic violence calls. The policies designed to protect victims have been weaponized into tools of automatic enforcement, where officers believe they have no discretion and must make an arrest whenever there is probable cause of physical contact, no matter how minor. This one-size-fits-all approach eliminates the possibility of nuance, context, or proportionality. It transforms officers from investigators exercising judgment into automatons, executing a script, and it creates perverse outcomes where minor altercations between young people result in criminal records, trauma, and civil rights violations. The boyfriend's age adds another layer of concern that the officers either overlooked or chose to ignore. An 18-year-old adult male in a relationship with a 14-year-old minor female raises immediate questions about the appropriateness and legality of that relationship. In many jurisdictions, such a relationship could constitute statutory rape or contributing to the delinquency of a minor, depending on the specifics of their interactions. Yet the officers showed no interest in investigating this aspect. They accepted the boyfriend's complaint at face value and focused all their enforcement energy on the minor girl, treating her as the aggressor and him as the victim, without considering the power dynamics inherent in their age difference. The father's lawsuit against the police department represents more than a single family's quest for justice. It exposes the structural failures that allow incidents like this to occur repeatedly, in jurisdiction after jurisdiction, with minimal consequences for the officers involved and no meaningful reform to prevent future occurrences. The legal system that is supposed to provide recourse for civil rights violations is designed in ways that make accountability extraordinarily difficult to achieve, even when the violations are captured on video and undeniable in their severity. Qualified immunity stands as the primary barrier between aggrieved citizens and justice. This judicially created doctrine shields government officials from liability unless they violate clearly established constitutional rights that a reasonable person would have known about. The standard sounds straightforward, but its application has become increasingly protective of officer conduct, no matter how egregious. Courts have interpreted clearly established to mean that there must be a prior case with nearly identical facts where the conduct was ruled unconstitutional. This creates an impossible paradox. If the specific configuration of facts has never been litigated before, then the right was not clearly established, and the officer receives immunity. But if officers always receive immunity for novel factual scenarios, then new patterns of abuse can never be clearly established as unconstitutional. The father and daughter in this case face this exact obstacle. Their attorneys must find precedent showing that arresting a cooperative 14-year-old girl for a minor altercation with an adult boyfriend, using physical force that causes injury, and then tasing her father for verbally objecting and attempting to secure the family dog, violates clearly established constitutional rights. Each element of this fact pattern must align with prior case law, or the officers can argue that they could not have known their conduct was unlawful. The absurdity of this standard becomes apparent when considered from a common-sense perspective. Does an officer truly need a court decision to know that violently arresting a compliant child for answering questions is wrong? The lawsuit also highlights the gap between constitutional standards and lived reality. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable seizures, which includes arrests made without probable cause or executed with excessive force. But the definition of reasonable is flexible enough that officers can almost always construct a post hoc justification for their actions. The girl moved away when grabbed, so she was resisting. The father stepped toward officers, so he was interfering. The dog was barking, so there was a safety concern. Each of these characterizations rewrites what actually happened, transforming natural human reactions into criminal conduct that supposedly justified escalating force. The departmental investigation that follows such incidents is equally compromised by institutional bias. Internal affairs divisions are staffed by officers investigating other officers, often people they know personally or work alongside. The culture of law enforcement emphasizes loyalty and solidarity, making it professionally and socially costly to find fellow officers at fault. Investigations are conducted behind closed doors, without civilian oversight or transparency. The standards applied are departmental policies rather than constitutional requirements, and policies are often written broadly enough to encompass nearly any action an officer might take. When the department's investigation concluded, the predictable result emerged. The officers were found to have acted within policy. Their use of force was deemed reasonable based on their perception of resistance and threat. The arrests were justified by probable cause for domestic violence and obstruction. No disciplinary action was recommended. The officers returned to duty without interruption, free to handle future calls with the same approach that traumatized this family. The only consequence they faced was the inconvenience of being named as defendants in a civil lawsuit, a burden largely borne by the city's legal department and liability insurance. The father's media interviews following the incident reveal the psychological toll of this experience. He describes feeling helpless as he watched his daughter being hurt. He speaks about the fear that gripped him when he realized the officers were not going to stop, that his compliance and cooperation meant nothing, that the rules he had been taught about respecting authority had failed to protect his family. His voice carries the weight of disillusionment, the recognition that the institutions he believed in do not function as advertised. His daughter's trauma is even more profound. At 14, she learned that honesty and cooperation with authority figures can result in violence and arrest. She discovered that being a victim in one context can instantly transform you into a perpetrator in another, depending on who tells the story first. She experienced the physical pain of being forcefully restrained and the emotional devastation of being treated as dangerous when she had done nothing to warrant such treatment. These lessons will shape her relationship with authority for the rest of her life, creating justifiable wariness and distrust that will affect every future interaction with law enforcement. The broader community response to this incident demonstrates the divide in how people perceive police conduct. Supporters of law enforcement argued that the officers faced a difficult situation and made split-second decisions under pressure. They emphasized the dangers officers face and the need to respect their authority. They suggested that if the family had simply complied without question or objection, none of this would have happened. This perspective places the burden entirely on citizens to submit to any police action, regardless of its legality or proportionality, and treats any deviation from perfect compliance as justification for force. Critics of the arrest pointed to the disproportion between the alleged offense and the enforcement response. They noted the officers' failure to consider alternatives to arrest, their lack of care in handling a juvenile, and their escalation of force against a cooperative family. They recognized that what happened to this family could happen to anyone, that compliance offers no guarantee of safety when officers operate without constraint or accountability. This perspective understands that constitutional rights mean nothing if they evaporate the moment an officer decides to make an arrest. The lawsuit itself proceeded through the slow machinery of civil litigation. Discovery requests were filed, seeking all Bodycam footage, dispatch recordings, officer training records, and departmental policies. Depositions were scheduled, where the officers would be questioned under oath about their decisions and actions. Expert witnesses were retained to testify about proper arrest procedures, use of force standards, and the psychological impact of police trauma on juveniles. Each step required time and money, resources that many families lack, which is why most incidents of police misconduct never result in lawsuits even when the violations are clear. The city's legal strategy followed a well-worn path: deny liability, assert qualified immunity, argue that the officers acted reasonably under the circumstances, and frame any settlement discussions as pragmatic risk management rather than admission of wrongdoing. This approach allows municipalities to resolve cases without acknowledging that their officers violated anyone's rights, maintaining the fiction that the lawsuit was frivolous or opportunistic rather than a legitimate grievance against unconstitutional conduct. For the officers involved, the existence of the lawsuit likely changed nothing about their day-to-day work. They continued responding to calls, making arrests, and exercising the same discretion that led to this incident. The department's finding that they acted within policy meant there was no reason to change their approach. The message sent to them and to other officers was clear. This conduct is acceptable, and the department will defend you if citizens complain. This creates a moral hazard where officers face no personal consequences for constitutional violations, encouraging aggressive enforcement without regard for proportionality or individual rights. The ultimate resolution of this case, whether through settlement or trial verdict, will not undo the harm caused. The daughter will carry the scars of this experience regardless of any financial compensation the family receives. The father's relationship with his daughter has been forever marked by his inability to protect her in that moment. The family's sense of security in their own home has been shattered. Money cannot repair these injuries, though it remains the only remedy our legal system offers for civil rights violations. What this incident reveals most starkly is the failure of Bodycam technology to achieve its promised accountability. The cameras captured everything: the cooperative family, the unjustified arrests, the excessive force, the father's desperate attempts to prevent harm. Yet that footage did not prevent the officers from acting as they did. It did not lead to immediate consequences or intervention by supervisors. It did not result in criminal charges or meaningful discipline. The cameras documented the violations but did not stop them, because the systems meant to respond to such documentation are controlled by the same institutions that employ the officers. True accountability would require fundamental restructuring of how police misconduct is investigated and punished. It would mean independent civilian oversight with real authority. It would require elimination or substantial limitation of qualified immunity. It would demand that officers face personal consequences, including termination and criminal prosecution, for clear violations of constitutional rights. It would necessitate a cultural shift within law enforcement away from viewing every interaction as a potential conflict requiring dominance and control, toward recognizing that officers serve the community and must operate within constitutional constraints, even when doing so is inconvenient or frustrating. But such reforms face enormous institutional resistance. Police unions lobby against accountability measures. Departments resist transparency and external oversight. Legislators, fearing being labeled anti-police, decline to impose meaningful restrictions on officer conduct. And the public remains divided, with many people unable or unwilling to believe that the officers they have been taught to trust routinely violate the rights of citizens with impunity. This family's story is not unique. It is repeated in countless variations across the country, in incidents that sometimes make the news but more often disappear without public attention. Each case represents individual trauma, but collectively they reveal a systemic pattern of misconduct enabled by inadequate training, poor supervision, and the absence of meaningful accountability. Until the systems that protect officers from the consequences of their actions are dismantled and rebuilt with citizen rights as the primary concern, incidents like this will continue to occur, and families will continue to suffer violations that our legal system is ill-equipped to remedy.